Hello, I hope you're well. Today I have a question for you. Who are you, really? How would you describe yourself to me? If these questions made you draw a blank or made you a bit uncomfortable, please stay with me. So last week I talked about the dangers of excessive people-pleasing and shaping who you are around other people's needs and desires. And today I want to discuss what lies beneath it all, and that is the issue of your identity. In my last video, I shared how pretty early on, because of my childhood and later on my eating disorders, I became a rather passive person. I gave up on having agency over my life, feeling in control, and exploring who I was and what I wanted. And this went on for many, many years until one day, during my master's, my psychiatrist at the time started off a session by saying, "Tell me about Marie-Louise. What does she like? What are her hopes and dreams? What is she afraid of?" And I still remember just sitting there, bewildered, and as he was looking at me with kind eyes, waiting for me to say something, anything, I grew increasingly irritated because deep down I knew those questions were important, but I wasn't ready to admit it, and I wasn't ready to face the fact that I had been just so lost and so passive. And I was afraid that if I had said out loud just how lost I felt, how little I knew who I was and what I wanted in life, and just how much I disliked where I was and what I was doing, it would just push me over the edge. So I wisely chose to run away from those questions. But I think that day a seed had been planted, and eventually those questions would find their way back to me many, many years later. This leads me to share with you 3 reasons why I think it's really important. In fact, it's one of the most important things you can do to take the time to face the issue of who you are and where you want to go in life. So reason number 1 is that if you don't choose to take the time to answer these questions yourself, life will eventually force you to confront this issue at some point. I've noticed that it's usually in the midst of a crisis, something big happening either in your personal life or in the world around you, that people will have to grapple with these questions. Again, to give you a personal example, after I shut down the whole thing with my psychiatrist, many years later, when I finally began to recover from my eating disorders, I found myself completely at a loss. For a long time, I had clung to the hope that overcoming my illness would mean that a life full of beauty and meaning would finally open up to me. But that was not the case. As my eating disorder symptoms got better, as I regained moment of freedom, I discovered I had no idea who I was outside of my illness. And in addition to confronting new health issues, probably brought on by other decades of eating disorders, I felt this emptiness. At the same time, the pandemic struck, and of course that was awful, but at the same time it led me to attend many different online events, and at one of those events I met a woman, a coach, who offered to do a free session with me. And I had been quite skeptical about the whole coaching world, but she seemed genuine and very nice, so I was like, yeah, sure, thank you. And after the session, she said she had been so struck by my story that she wanted to invite me to join her group coaching program for free. And she said, "What I ask of you is that one day you may share your story with other people, and that might help someone else." So I guess that's partially what I'm doing now. So I started attending this group program, and at first again, my heart wasn't really in it, but I quickly became a convert and I saw that there was a lot of value to be had by actively engaging in the sessions. And it was hard, I must say. It was really hard to have to admit out loud, at least to myself, that I knew so little about myself and I had so many fears. I was so scared of so many different things for so many different reasons. My life had become so small and I was terrified of stepping out of my comfort zone. And I think if I hadn't done that work with that coach, I would have fallen apart a few years later when, again, facing a new crisis. This past year, as you probably know by now, my mom got very sick. So my identity as a daughter has undergone a massive shift. And also a few people from my childhood have died. So I really have the feeling that a chapter of my life is closing forever. And again, I think if I hadn't done the work back then to have a clear sense of who I am and what I want out of life, I'd be struggling much more now. So the main takeaway from all this is that change is going to happen at some point, whether you like it or not. So if you do the work, if you are clear about who you are and where you want to go, you'll meet these changes, these challenges standing. If you don't have this clarity, you'll just have to go with the flow and let external circumstances lead you somewhere you may not want to go. Reason number 2, why we should work on answering these questions, is that people will label you. Despite what my t-shirt says, labels are for clothes, which I did not buy for this video. I actually bought it many years ago in Dublin, and it's one of my favorite teas. But despite this noble message, people will label you. We label other people as well. It's a human thing to do. And it's not really a problem if you have a clear sense of who you are. The problem is if you don't. And again, a personal example, because of my eating disorders and the shame I carried for so long, I had to live in secrecy, keep a lot of who I was and my life hidden from other people. And this led me, for example, to have to say no to many social gatherings, to have to make up excuse after excuse as to why I couldn't attend said gatherings or as to why I was often sick. And in time, of course, people started viewing me as someone who was very quiet and reserved at best, if not standoffish or snobbish. And what's worse is that in time, I myself started labeling myself that way and describing myself like that to other people. And it was only many years later when I moved to Ireland and I unexpectedly found myself in a very people-facing job and also dealing with people who had no idea of who I had been until then, and the labels other people had given me, that I discovered that I loved being with people, I loved talking with them, I loved laughing with them, I loved cracking jokes. I mean, I'm not a wild extrovert, but I'm nowhere close to that introvert that everyone else, myself included, had decided I was. So the takeaway here is, if you know who you are, other people's labels won't be a mirror. And that clarity is what leads me to reason number 3. If you decide to be open to these questions, to approach them deliberately, then you'll build a way more intentional and meaningful life. If you don't, you'll just go with the flow, you'll coast. And one day you'll wake up thinking, oh my God, what has happened? How did I end up here? So let me leave you with the same questions that my psychiatrist asked me a long time ago. Who are you? Tell me about yourself. What are your hopes and dreams? What are you afraid of? I'll be honest, I still haven't figured this out completely, but these questions don't scare me. They don't terrify me like they once did. In fact, I approach them with curiosity and also with compassion for my many, many limitations. Getting to know yourself is the journey of a lifetime. Like every single journey, it starts with the first step. So if you've been watching this and thinking, yeah, sure, Mary Louise, of course. But where do I start? What do I do now? Take that first step, and it can be many, many things. You don't need, like some of the personal development world would have us believe, a complicated, super efficient 5 a.m. routine, or an intimidating checklist, or an expensive retreat, or mastermind. What you need to do is, for instance, pick one of those questions and choose to sit with it 5 minutes a day for a week. And have a journal with you and write down the answers. Even if they're messy, even if you're not sure where to lead you, no judgment. And at the end of the week, see what's come out. Or do some guided meditations. For instance, I use Insight Timer, which is a free app if you're interested. And one thing I started doing is paying attention to the tracks that really call to me. For instance, for the past couple of months, I've been following one specific teacher whose meditations just speak to my soul. I don't know how else to express this. I listen to her and I just, I feel my heart singing. And so I started, again, curiosity is key. I started asking myself, what is it about her message and the way she delivers it that is so important to me right now? What does it say about where I'm at in life? Another way you can learn more about yourself is picking up a new hobby. For instance, yoga and theater have taught me so much about myself. So I'd say, curiosity above all. And start small, but be consistent. A little bit every day goes a long, long way. So this is it for today. I invite you to share that first step you're going to take in the comments. And maybe later on, come back and share where that step has led you, what you've learned about yourself. And until my next video, please take good care and see you again soon. Bye bye, ciao.